welcome to this too. I am your host, Timothy, and I want to thank you for joining us on today's episode. And before we dive into today's topic, I just want to go through my usual disclaimer. So firstly, I am not a qualified mental health professional in any way, shape or form. I'm not here to provide any kind of diagnosis or therapy to anyone. This is purely a sounding board, purely a space where I'm trying to speak about my experiences with my diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder, how they've affected my life, how depression pushed me to the brink of suicide, and how I'm trying to recover and find my way forward. Also, after experiencing an abusive relationship that pushed me and compounded all those negative traits and experiences and pushed me to the brink where I almost took my life. And now as I try and chart my way forward and find a new life for myself, I'm hoping that I can use this platform to provide a space where men are free and able to speak. And I hope that what I'm saying resonates, and I hope that you find something of value here. So, whatever you are going through, this too shall pass. So without further ado, let's dive in. Today, I don't have anything really specific to speak about. It's kind of an update to those of you that have been listening. So, I've been battling depression for years, consciously and unconsciously. I really didn't know that I had a specific personality disorder, and I don't like to use the word disorder because it has such a negative connotation, but at the same time, this isn't a normal pattern of behavior or the behavior of somebody who's well adjusted. So I need to just be mindful of trying to be measured in terms of how I speak about it. I don't want to make as if what I'm dealing with is frivolous, or because other people's experience of borderline is completely different. So like everything in life, there's a spectrum, and I feel like for the most part, I haven't been that negatively affected by borderline personality, but I can see certain things where now that I understand what the traits are and how borderline shows up in your life, I'm able to identify some of those things and some of the patterns of behavior. And certainly the fear of abandonment was a strong one. And that's something that was born out of childhood trauma and then replicated in adult relationships. And now as I'm trying to heal these things and heal the patterns of behavior that lead me down that road, it's really difficult to not be hard on myself. When recognizing things that you've done, behaviors, actions that you've committed, when you weren't operating from the most emotionally secure space. There are things that I've done that I am embarrassed about. There's things that I did that I know hurt my partners. There was never an intention to hurt, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's something I do want to talk about because it was something that was said to me, and it's stuck with me, and it's been this thorn in my side, and I need to kind of vent about this and speak about this because I feel like, again, just the way things are being positioned, I need to address, I feel like I want to speak about it. So people sometimes say things like, "This is my truth," and that is something that really gets me, because that basically means that on some level you're not telling the whole story. You're not being objective, and you are not being considerate of the people or the other stakeholders or people impacted or affected by whatever the situation is. It's like somebody, when people say things like, and this is something that's said often in the colored community, when people want to say things and get it off your chest, like, don't couple feelings, basically like, don't be sensitive about this, don't take it to heart, all due respect. It would probably be a nicer way to say it. And that just means that I'm giving myself license to say something that is completely dickish. Sorry for my French. And I don't want to take responsibility for the fact that what I'm saying is mean. Instead, what I'm going to do is put that on you and say that you're being too sensitive and you're not able to manage your feelings in terms of what I'm saying. And that is absolutely the biggest load of nonsense and a level of cowardice that it really hurts. Not hurts, but it aggravates me, because it's something that I've had to experience a lot of in the relationship that drove me to my limits. There was always their version of the truth, which was never the actual truth. And that used to affect me to such a level that it used to make me question my reality. Because it's a form of gaslighting, and I was gaslit a lot. I was lied to and I was manipulated. And what makes me angry with myself, like I mentioned at the start, is that you sit back and you look and you think, how could you have been so foolish to swallow that? How could you have accepted that? How could you have believed that? Now that you see patterns, now that you see things differently. But I need to give myself the grace and forgiveness, because at that time, in that moment, it wasn't just about the trauma or being naive or being foolish. It was about a survival instinct to some extent, because so much of myself and so much of my existence was wrapped up in my relationship and my family, and the thought of losing that meant that I cease to exist, because I'm a father, I'm a partner, I give, I show up. What am I if I don't have these things to show up for anymore? So I was operating out of a completely different space and need, and I was selling myself out, and I was accepting things that I shouldn't have. Behavior, lies, dishonesty, lies of omission. Even when you knew, you kind of let it slide, because I guess there's no other way to say it. I was weak in those moments. I allowed myself to think that what I needed, or what I thought I needed, was more important than who I was. And I forgot how much value I actually have as a person. And I failed to remember. Yeah, so I think when people say things like that, like, this is my tooth, and with all due respect, don't couple feelings, all of that, it's to try and indemnify them of any kind of responsibility in terms of dishonesty or the hurtful impact of their words. Because when you say things like that, when you say certain things and you try and put the responsibility of the offense or the impact on the listener, you're skirting the responsibility from yourself as the person who created that story, who said those words. And you certainly have a responsibility in terms of how that lands and impacts and hurts someone else. And that is most definitely on you as the person who said those things. To intentionally deceive or to withhold truth, and then to turn around and say, well, that's my truth, or to manipulate the truth to such an extent and then try and turn around and say, well, that's my truth. And I do apologize. That is my experience of that particular behavior. So I don't have the best or highest regard of anybody who does that. I think it's incredibly cowardice. Cowardice. I'm not sure which is the correct one, because you are being inherently dishonest, but you are trying to be clever and hide your dishonesty. And you think that gives you a pass. Like people who lie by omission. They try and tell themselves what they're not actually lying. They're selectively honest, or however you want to put it. But they're intentionally withholding information. Why? Because they know that the information that they're withholding is going to paint them in a negative light, or it's going to be received negatively. So what do? We withhold that information, and then we get to walk around with the idea in our heads that we are inherently good people because we didn't quote unquote tell a lie. That again has been my experience, so I don't know what your experience has been of people who are dishonest or who tell lies, but that's mine. That's been my experience of people who try and bend the truth and manipulate, and then put the issue on your shoulders by saying that you're insecure, you don't trust, etc. It's always the person who's receiving the information with whom the issue lies, never the person that is initiating the message. Doesn't matter what I've said, doesn't matter what lines I've crossed, you're the one that is to blame because you're too sensitive. That's essentially what's happening there for me. Because that's been my experience of it. If you agree with me or don't agree with me, let me know. But that's my view. And I think that people who try and focus on always telling my story, my truth, you're basically a liar. That's what I'm saying. Because if you were actually an honest and truthful person, you would tell the whole story. Even the parts that make you look bad. But now for some reason those parts are being omitted. That says more than anything. And yeah, you can hear I'm getting a little agitated by that, so I think I'll draw a line there. And so that'll just be something short for today. Let's talk about the impact of people who manipulate and withhold the truth. Maybe that's something you want to think about and recognize and try and analyze in your relationships. How does that impact you? How does that make you feel? How do you respond to those moments? Or are you somebody who manipulates and obscures the truth to maintain the upper hand in your relationship or relationships? And what is it that scares you about being completely honest and truthful? Because the truth is always going to come out, right? At least that's what we're told. And we're told in this world that we are supposed to be honest people and that relationships rely on honesty and truth. So how can we be so ambivalent and expect the relationships that we need to sustain us through life? How can we feed them lies and half-truths and expect these relationships to be what we need them to be? If we're going to feed lies and we're going to misinform and manipulate through the information that we give, how can we expect these relationships to be for us what we need them to be? Because we are not making them what our partners need them to be. Because your partner needs you to be truthful, your partner needs you to be honest, your partner needs you to be accountable and hold your part and own your part. And if you are selective in terms of your truth or your story, then you are certainly not holding the weight like you should. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents for today. It's just something that I felt like I wanted to get off my chest. So thank you for hearing me out. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. We're available on YouTube now. I really want to try and grow something positive out of this. I want to build a community. I'm going to keep sending information out there. I'll keep releasing podcasts. I just hope that you guys join me. I know this is a bit scattershot today. It's just something I wanted to say, and I wanted to get something out there as well. So please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, review. It just helps me to try and grow this into something worthwhile. I can actually do some good work and hopefully help other guys in my situation or prevent guys from getting in my situation. So thank you. Thank you for your time and your attention. Just remember, whatever you are going through in life, whether it's good or bad, this too shall pass.